There was a time when Australia was genuinely the land of opportunity, a place where if you worked hard, you could afford a home with a backyard, a car in the driveway, a family holiday every year, and maybe even a comfortable beachside retirement. It was the lucky country, blessed with vast natural resources, a relatively small population, and a steady flow of well-paying jobs. Even during the 2008 global financial crisis, Australia stood tall while other economies crumbled. It seemed almost immune to the chaos of the outside world. But something has shifted. That promise, the idea that each generation will do better than the last, is fading. What we're seeing now is more than just a cost of living squeeze or housing unaffordability. It's a deep structural transformation, a financial identity crisis, where the old rules no longer apply and the old dreams feel out of reach for an increasing number of Australians. In this video, we're going to unpack what exactly this crisis is, how it came to be, and why Australia is struggling to define its financial future. Because this isn't just a story of dollars and cents. It's a story of culture, governance, globalization, and millions of people quietly asking, is the system still working for me? Let's start with the numbers. Australia is the world's 12th largest economy by nominal GDP. On paper, the country is wealthy. Its GDP per capita sits around $66,000 USD, placing it among the richest nations globally. It consistently ranks high in global livability indexes. The unemployment rate, as of early 2025, is relatively low, hovering near 4.1%. Exports are strong, thanks to iron ore, coal, LNG, and agriculture. So what's the problem? The problem is that the prosperity isn't being felt evenly, or even realistically, by the average Australian. Beneath these glossy macro numbers is a working and middle class quietly being crushed by costs, debt, and stagnation. Let's talk about wages. For over a decade, wage growth in Australia has been painfully sluggish. Between 2013 and 2023, real wages, that is, wages adjusted for inflation, barely moved. The average full-time adult weekly earnings in November 2024 was just under $1,900, or around $98,800 per year. That may sound decent, but it doesn't go far in modern Australia. Not when median house prices in Sydney top $1.6 million, and even in more affordable cities like Brisbane or Perth, you're still looking at $700,000 to $800,000. Housing, once the cornerstone of the Australian dream, has become the cornerstone of its crisis. There's no way to understand Australia's financial identity crisis without talking about real estate. For decades, property ownership has been woven into the national psyche. It wasn't just a place to live. It was your retirement plan, your safety net, your status symbol, and for a long time it worked. But now, that same obsession with property has created a deeply distorted economy. Home ownership rates are plummeting among young Australians. In 1994-95, over 60% of people aged 25 to 34 owned their home. Today, that number has dropped to just 40%. The reason? Prices have far outpaced wages. The ratio of house prices to income in Australia is now among the highest in the world, more than 8 times the average annual income in many cities. And yet, people keep buying. Why? Because property has become more investment than shelter. Over 30% of the housing market is owned by investors, many of whom leverage tax breaks like negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount to grow their portfolios. This system has created a perverse reality. Those who already own property are doing just fine, asset-rich, equity-wealthy, but those who don't? They're either trapped in the rental market, where vacancy rates are at historic lows and rents are skyrocketing, or forced to borrow to dangerous levels just to get a foot on the ladder. As of 2025, the average new mortgage in Australia sits at over $600,000, and household debt-to-income ratios are around 187%, among the highest in the world. Australia is no longer a country of homeowners. It's a country of mortgagees, and it's bleeding the spirit of financial freedom dry. The second punch in this financial identity crisis is the rising cost of living. Inflation may have slowed from its pandemic highs, but it hasn't reversed. Essentials, food, fuel, insurance, education, and health have all gone up significantly over the past 5 years. Let's take groceries. According to ABS data, grocery prices rose by over 20% between 2019 and 2024. Electricity bills are up by 30%. Health insurance premiums climb each year, and out-of-pocket medical costs are now a major burden even for those with coverage. Childcare is another pressure point. The average cost of full-time childcare in capital cities is between $130 to $180 per day per child. That's over $30,000 per year, enough to make some families question whether it's even worth both parents working. Transport is no better. Public transit fares have risen sharply, and petrol remains high, hovering around $2.10 to $2.40 per liter, depending on the region. Meanwhile, real wage growth remains near zero, which means people are doing everything right, working hard, budgeting, saving where they can, but still feel like they're going backwards. And that creates something more insidious than financial stress. It creates disillusionment. Australia's identity has long been rooted in its middle class. Egalitarianism, fair go. No one's too rich, no one's too poor, and most people sit somewhere in the middle. But that middle is shrinking, and fast. In 2003, around 60% of Australians fell into the middle income bracket. Today, it's closer to 45%, according to Grattan Institute research. Meanwhile, wealth inequality has deepened. The top 10% of households now own almost 50% of all household wealth. The bottom 60%, they share just 17%. This is no longer a country of even playing fields. It's one where your postcode determines your future, where asset ownership, not effort, defines your security. And where upward mobility, the idea that each generation will do better than the last, is being quietly buried. You can see it in the demographics. Young Australians are delaying marriage, delaying children, and increasingly giving up on home ownership altogether. University graduates are saddled with HECS help debts that can take decades to pay off, all while renting in cities they can't afford and working in jobs that barely keep up with inflation. For many, it feels like the rules of the game changed, and no one told them. Another critical layer of Australia's financial identity crisis is the culture of overspending, a quiet epidemic that's gripping households across the country. In a society where wealth is often measured by what you own rather than what you earn, many Australians are spending beyond their means just to keep up appearances. The big house, the new car, the overseas holiday, the latest gadgets, these aren't just luxuries anymore. They've become expectations, even when the underlying finances don't support them. This is particularly dangerous in a climate of high interest rates and record-breaking personal debt. As of 2025, Australia's household debt-to-income ratio remains among the highest in the world, hovering near 187%. Means for every dollar earned, Australians owe nearly two. And a significant chunk of that debt isn't just mortgages, it's credit cards, personal loans, and buy now, pay later services. Social media and cultural norms have amplified this pressure. The curated Instagram lifestyle has made it harder to admit financial struggle. Instead of downgrading, many double down, using debt to sustain a lifestyle that's increasingly out of reach. The result? A nation where financial stress is widespread, but rarely spoken about. Where overspending is not seen as a crisis, but as a necessity to belong. In a country once celebrated for its laid-back egalitarian ethos, the quiet desperation to keep up is a sign that something deeper is wrong. Australia isn't just in a financial bind, it's chasing an image it can no longer afford. This leads us to the heart of the crisis. Who is the Australian economy really working for? Because it's clearly not working equally. It's not working for the nurses, teachers, and tradies who can't afford to live within 30 kilometers of where they work. Not for renters facing 10% plus annual increases while being one rent hike away from eviction. Not for single parents choosing between paying the power bill and buying groceries. Not for small business owners drowning in high rents, expensive staff costs, and razor-thin margins. These are the people who keep the country running, yet increasingly, they're running on empty. But the system is working for a select few. For investors with 5 properties, racking up tax breaks. For baby boomers who bought their homes before the boom and have watched their equity soar. For mining giants sitting on lucrative export deals. And for the big banks who pulled in over $30 billion in profits in 2024, much of it driven by high interest rates squeezing mortgage holders. Australia has quietly transformed into an economy that preserves and amplifies existing wealth, rather than creating new opportunities. And while some dismiss this as just the market sorting itself out, a deeper look reveals something more troubling. A policy environment that has not only allowed inequality to grow, but has actively fueled it. Australia's financial identity crisis didn't happen by accident. It's been shaped by years of political decisions, many of them made with short-term wins in mind, rather than long-term national health. Take tax policy. Australia's tax system heavily favors asset holders. Negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount cost the budget over $10 billion annually, benefits that overwhelmingly go to higher-income households. Meanwhile, essential services like Medicare, aged care, and education are under growing strain. Then there's superannuation, a system that was meant to provide secure retirement but is increasingly becoming a wealth accumulator for those who already have high incomes. The average super balance at retirement for women is just $178,000 compared to $332,000 for men. And that's the average. Many people retire with far less. What about housing policy? Governments have repeatedly promised affordability measures, yet often introduce schemes like first home buyer grants or shared equity programs that unintentionally drive prices even higher by boosting demand without increasing supply. It's not that Australia lacks the tools to fix its crisis. It's that the political will is often missing, or worse, captured by vested interests. Of course, not everything can be blamed on Canberra. Australia doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's a medium-sized economy in a volatile global system, and much of what happens beyond its borders inevitably hits home. Rising global interest rates, post-pandemic inflation, supply chain disruptions, wars, energy shocks, and ongoing geopolitical tensions, particularly involving the US, China, and Russia, all shape Australia's economic landscape. And let's not forget China, Australia's largest trading partner, whose own economic slowdown has direct implications for Australian exports, especially iron ore and coal. Then there's climate change, which is no longer a distant concern. It's here, driving up food prices through droughts and floods, and inflating insurance premiums as natural disasters become more frequent. Global capital, seeking safe havens, pours into Australian real estate, driving prices higher and further disconnecting housing from local incomes. But here's the thing. What defines a country's identity isn't just how it's affected by external forces, it's how it responds to them. And right now, Australia seems caught in an identity limbo. On one hand, it clings to its legacy as a resource-rich, high-growth economy. On the other, it's clearly becoming a service-heavy society plagued by deepening inequality. It wants to be the lucky country. But increasingly, that luck feels manufactured and dangerously uneven. So, what's next? Australia is at a crossroads, and identity crises don't fix themselves. The good news? There are real solutions on the table. Tax reform that reduces inequality, investment in social housing and rental protections, genuine wage growth tied to productivity, affordable childcare, education and healthcare systems that aren't quietly eroding, energy policies that reduce bills and emissions, and a shift away from property speculation toward real productivity and innovation. But all of that requires courage, political, cultural, and economic. It requires Australians to ask hard questions about what kind of country they want to be. Do we want to be a nation where wealth is hoarded or shared? Where prosperity is tied to assets or effort? Where future generations can still dream of a better life? Or where that dream is dismissed as naive? The signs are clear. Australia is not broken, but it is drifting. And unless something changes, structurally, politically, culturally, it risks becoming a place where success is inherited, not earned. Where growth benefits the top and the bottom learns to expect less. Where the national myth of the fair go becomes just that, a myth. But identity crises can also be turning points. Moments when societies stop, reflect, and reset. The question is, will Australia take that moment? Or will it keep pretending everything's fine until it's not? Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about Australia's financial direction? Do you feel the system still works for you? Until next time.